Jeffro from Two Hacks Garage. You guessed it, back on the 311 cubic inch small block Chevy Ripper that's going in jumping jack flash. If you've seen in the last few videos, well, we got the crankshaft installed. We set our thrust on that, and we got our measurements for our bearing clearances. Now it is time to actually assemble pistons and rods. I know for a lot of people that is a simple task, but for me, once was a beginner, and I'm still learning, there are some things that you need to be aware of as you do that. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to assemble pistons and rods, and also a couple things you need to make sure you do when it involves piston orientation and rod orientation. First off, let's take a look at what parts we're going to be working with. All right, so first off, we're going to talk about the pistons. These are a Sealed Power Speed Pro forged piston. As you can see, it's got that nice dome on it for compression. These were a pretty decent price to find. I'm going to tell you what, with this 3-inch stroke crank and kind of the odd piston height, pistons aren't exactly the easiest thing when you're going to build a 302 small block Chevy based engine. But yeah, there's the piston that we're working with, and here's the rods. These are an Eagle H-beam connecting rod. It is a floater pin style. It's not pressed in. I actually prefer the floater. It makes things a whole lot easier to install. And you know what, guys? It saves you a trip to go in the machine shop to get those in there. So yeah, that's the rods that I'm working with. So the tools we're going to be working with on this, well, this is almost going to be kind of a tool review too. I got this Proform connecting rod vise. It's pretty neat. The way these work is absolutely awesome. So that's the tool we're going to use, and we're going to be using it with our Miami vise. Yeah, a little bit of a dad joke there. So yeah, those are the parts we're going to be working with. Like I said, forged Speed Pro Sealed Power pistons and Eagle H-beam rods. Real quick, guys, not only when I went through this, I weighed everything out and I matched everything per cylinder on this engine. So if you notice on here, you'll see an 8 and you'll see an 8. That is for cylinder number 8. And I'm going to show you why that's important here in a second. If you don't do this every day, and I don't, sometimes you kind of forget what is, where the cylinders are and all that type of fun jazz. So if this engine was rotated up this way, installed in the vehicle, cylinder number 1 on a small block Chevy is right here. So that is actually supposed to be here, but when it's flipped upside down, you'll notice I marked on here 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. It's just a really good little tech tip. If you don't do this every day, building engines, it's nice to have those numbers in front of you. Like I said, on my pistons and rods, I went ahead, when I balanced everything out and weighed it before going to the machine shop, I actually matched each cylinder to the piston and rod. So everything is numbered. So as I go and assemble this, I know number 8 goes to number 8, number 7 goes to 7, and so on. Just a nice little tech tip, kind of helps you out. And you know what, guys? Anything like that to help you out, especially when you do it every day, that's a win-win in my book. One other quick thing to look at, kind of a tech tip when you're building engines, you need to make sure you have your piston oriented correctly. If you notice on here, you see that dome with the valve reliefs. Well, the problem, or not the problem, but the thing is what that is, you need to make sure you get that right in the block, because on a small block Chevy cylinder head, if you notice here, that's the spark plug relief. That's where the spark plug sits. And this is where the valves go in. And I believe that's a 23-degree angle head that I'm going to be using. So let's take a look how that looks in the engine. Just going to slide that into the cylinder gently. It's a little loose, and I'll explain that later. So if you see there, this is the top of the engine here. I know it's upside down, but that's the top. So your spark plug's here. Your intake port is over here, and your valves are going that way. So what I do, so I don't make any mistakes when assembling these, I put an arrow right there. That just means that, hey, that's the top of the piston. I know. You can tell by the spark plug relief, and you can tell by the valve reliefs. But on flat tops and some other pistons, especially the 4 eyebrow, it's kind of hard to tell. So what I do is I just put that little arrow on there, and that helps me remember as I build. Like I said, I don't do this every day. One other thing I do when you look at my parts, I always have them labeled in and out. And what that really means is out is towards the outer side of the crankshaft, and in is the inside of the crankshaft or rod side. The reason that's important, if you look at your connecting rods, you see that radius right there on that side, on the outside, and on the inside, not much of a radius at all. There's a reason why. If you take a look at your crankshaft journal, the crank is actually radius. It's called the fillet right there. And that somewhat matches that large radius right there. So on the other side, your rod side, you notice it doesn't have that. It has a smaller one. And the reason being is, well, there's no fillet / radius in the middle. And what you have right there between those two is your actual rods. They match up, and that is your rod side. And there's an actual clearance spec in there, and we're going to do that. We're going to show that here once we get these installed later on. But the reason being is, so you see those two there, they're nice and flat. When they're on that journal, they're like this, okay? And you're going to have a little bit of clearance in there. So yeah, that's why I mark those in and out. Out is towards the fillets on the crank. In is towards the inside or rod side. All right, here's another tech tip. I like to get everything laid out in advance. It makes things quicker, a little bit cleaner, and you know what? Just really simplifies the process. So if you notice, I got 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way from the front to the back, and I'll do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When I'm done, I'm going to get them all laid out here. This is a nice, clean working environment. But the tools you're going to need to do this, you are going to need to have a ratchet with a socket that's going to fit the cap screw on here, because we're going to take those apart. The other thing you're going to need, you're going to want some oil. I'm just using some, regular engine oil, and that's going to be used to lubricate the pins when we go to put those in. And the fun part, these aren't spiral locks. These are just clip style. You're going to need yourself a nice set of needle nose pliers to help install those, along with like a little pick or flathead screwdriver, tiny one. And this is where we're going to give this rod vise from Proform a shot. And I already have it secured into my Miami vise, so that's all ready, set, and go. So you know what, guys? What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get this started. Okay, so first step of what I'm going to do is I am actually going to remove the cap on this. Now, these are torqued and pressed into place, and I actually have this really cool connecting rod splitting tool. However, I'm working with somewhat of an older engine with a very small journal, and my connecting rod splitting tool is actually neat. It goes in here and opens it up and pops it loose. It's meant for like the regular 2/100 size rod journal, larger that you see. I'm working with small journals, so I'm going to show you how to do this here. So first off, what you're going to do is you're going to use this connecting rod vise, which I absolutely love. I'm just going to snug that on. Now you got to remember, this material is it's not as hard as this, so it's not going to mar that surface. So what I'm going to do is I am going to loosen these up. Like I said, they are torqued down. I'm going to run them out a little bit, not all the way. About that far. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this thing. And if you look here, you can see where the connecting rod splits. You don't want to go beating on that. You want to do this carefully. I need to get this split. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this the other way in the vise. Like I said, I have these already in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp it to this top half. I'm just going to tap lightly, evenly each side to pop that loose. So I'm making sure I'm on this, not on the split itself, so I can get this loose. And like I said, I'm just lightly putting that in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm lightly going to tap that. And what I'm going to use to do that, because you're not tapping hard, I'm actually going to use the socket I have so you don't damage any of the threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the socket cap screw itself, and I'm just going to lightly tap it. Do it evenly on each side. There we go. Connecting rod comes apart. And you notice since I kept those in place, it didn't allow it to fall. So now what I'm going to do is just finger loosen these out like so. And I always do this one at a time. So now that I got that apart, what I'm going to do is I am just going to keep the rod bolts where they're at with this cap because you don't want to mix stuff up. So I do this one at a time. I'm just going to take these, put it on my bench. If you're ever wondering which orientation those rods really need to go, the cylinders aren't actually even to each other from one bank to the other. If you were to look at cylinder number 1 here, you look straight down that crankshaft, you can see where that piston rod is going to line up. It's going to go straight down there onto that side. Now, pay attention to that right there. And we're going to go over to cylinder number 2. You can notice that it's offset more this way. And when you look straight down, that rod's going to go right down there. So again, if you look straight down, you can pretty much get a good orientation of where that rod's going to go onto the crankshaft. All right, so now we can go and start assembling the connecting rod to the piston itself. So what I'm going to do first, I like clean environments. I'm just going to take a nice, fresh, clean cloth that's lint-free, and I'm going to wipe down the pin itself. And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the piston right there. Let's get that cleaned out. Get everything out of there, and I'm going to do the same thing inside the connecting rod. So the first step, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a little bit of oil right in here and right in there. So I'm just going to squirt a little bit in there. Not a lot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe that around in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You want to lubricate all your parts as you're putting them together. That prevents binding, and it also prevents unneeded wear when you go to fire this thing up. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is we're actually going to connect that on there. One thing to remember, always make sure your orientation is correct. And if you just saw, I showed you how you can verify that. And another thing to do, what you can do when you go over there and take a look at it, I wrote out, that's the fillet side, and out. So when I go to put this together, I know that I'm doing it the right way. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the pin like this, start sliding it in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of oil right along here, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the connecting rod. Put some oil in there, wipe that around. Slide that in to about right there. And here's where I'm going to add some more oil right in here. Always make sure your parts are lubricated. So once you do that, you're going to kind of work it around, and it's going to start sliding in nice and easy. And there is a little oil hole right in there. I like to squirt a little bit of oil in there. I'm going to start pushing this thing through. And once it comes through, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing on this back side. Get some oil right there. A little more on this outside. Let it run down the sides. And I'm just going to take that and I'm going to squeeze that through. You want to feel it to make sure it's got enough oil on it. Like I said, it doesn't hurt to add a little bit of oil when you're doing this either. Like I said, you want these things to be lubricated. So I'm just going to move that around like that, back and forth. Feels pretty good. So there you have it. That connecting rod is on that piston. And now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to install the lock. All right, so the next step is you want to put your wrist pin lock in there. Some are spiral lock. This is more kind of like a C-clip lock style thing. It's springy. I am using the kind Connecting rod vise I got from Proform. It really helps hold that in place while I do this. It is in my Miami vise. And the first thing you're going to want to look at first is if you were to look at this piston, it's actually got a groove built in there. And that's where this goes. So what you need to do is you need to get in there. These aren't too bad to work with. Basically, what I'm going to use is a small pair of needle nose pliers. And if I need to, I got a small pick to help get that in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze this and start getting this down in there, into that groove, lock it into place, and there we go. And if you notice now that it's in that groove, all nice and locked into place. And you're going to do that on the other side too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip this over. Clamp down just lightly. Push your wrist pin down. Take another lock. Get that into place. There you have it, guys. Those are in place. You're going to do that to every single one. All right, so now that's assembled, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the bearings in these. If you saw in previous video, I did measure for connecting rod bearing clearances with a dial bore gauge and micrometer. So at this point, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that your surfaces are clean. And I know these are, but I'm just going to go in, give them a nice quick wipe so there's no debris anywhere in there. And what you're going to do is you're going to install your connecting rod bearings. Now, I did talk about in the previous video that there is an upper and a lower. So with that, I'm using a Molle performance bearing. These have extra clearance built in because this is a race engine and I am running it loose. On these bearings, there is an upper and a lower. It's going to tell you right there. I know that's hard to see. Sorry, that's the part number. It's going to be hard to see on there. But this is the upper shell. So the upper shell is actually the connecting rod part itself. And then you're going to have a lower, and it's going to say on there too, it's kind of hard to see, but it says lower, and that's going to be your rod cap. So always make sure you check that. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bearing, and I'm going to clip this into place, and you notice it's got the tang right there, and same thing with the bearing. So it's basically just tang to tang. There you go, locked into place. So I'm going to do that to that one, and I'm going to do the same thing on the rod cap. Get that into place. There we have it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to orient these here. I'm going to put it back on the connecting rod, the rod cap back on the connecting rod. Put it in there. Make sure your radiuses are correct on there. And you're not going to torque these down. All you're going to do is you're going to put the rod cap bolts back in. Now these do have Molle lube on them. And the reason you're doing that, you don't need to torque them down all the way for this step because obviously they got to come back apart. So the reason I do one at a time is so you don't accidentally mix match your rod caps to your connecting rod. And there we have it. So that one right there is done. And all I'm going to do is set that one out of the way. And I'm going to go through and do, well, the rest of those. See you in a few. All right, well, there they all are. We got them all assembled the correct way. And if you notice when I was walking away, I was just making orientation was correct. Want to always make sure that is 100% right. So yeah, there we have it. Check it out, guys. We have our pistons and rods assembled with the bearings in. Not too shabby. That took, I don't know, hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes to do. Like I said, just take your time. Don't force it. Use the proper tools. Make sure everything's lubed up and clean. Well, there you have it, guys. That was a step-by-step process on how to assemble your pistons and your connecting rods and get those bearings in. Like I said, it's really not that hard, and I helped give you some tips and tricks to make sure you have your rods and your pistons oriented correctly to the crankshaft. So when you go put this together, it's all laid out perfectly. If you notice there also, I showed you some tricks and tips on how to just label everything. Takes a little bit of time, but trust me, if you don't do this every day, like I don't, those little things like that really come in handy. From there, you know what? Just take your time. Make sure things are clean, make sure things are properly lubricated, and make sure you're using the right tools. That took maybe, I don't know, an hour and a half to do. And I tell you what, guys, it was, not that bad at all. Next video, what we're going to do is we're going to check the piston rings for gap. We're going to see if they need to be filed or not. And what we're going to do then is get those installed on the pistons so we can get these things poked in. But I tell you what, guys, what really made this a whole lot easier was this Proform connecting rod vise. When you take your caps apart from your connecting rod, you got to be super careful. You just don't want to go beating on it. And if you notice in there, I lightly clamped it with this and just used that socket to lightly tap them apart. This thing is worth its weight in gold. It helped me safely do it, held it into place correctly. And I tell you what, this is one awesome tool. I absolutely love it. I'm going to use this moving forward pretty much on all my engine builds. It's a great addition to my Miami Vice over there. Get it? Miami Vice. With that, you're probably sick and tired of hearing me say dad jokes. So until then, Two Hacks Garage. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.